I tried being helpful for 10 minutes, which in my house is considered a full-time job. It started the way most of my bad ideas do, with confidence that had no evidence to support it. My wife was doing that thing where she's moving around fast, but also very quietly, which means she's either extremely focused or extremely mad, and I couldn't tell which one it was. So I figured this is my moment to step in and be a hero, or at least a person who doesn't make things worse, which historically has been a tough standard for me to meet. She said, "I'm gonna run upstairs for a second." And that was all the permission I needed to ruin the next 2 hours of our lives. I looked around the room and thought, this is fine, this is manageable, this is just a few objects in places I don't personally recognize, which to me means they must be out of place. So I started picking things up and putting them where I thought they should go. They're smart, which is a bold move when you don't know where anything lives. I don't even know where I live half the time. I still open the wrong door in my own house like I'm visiting. I picked up a stack of papers that looked important, mostly because they weren't mine, and I put them somewhere safe, which is a word I use when I want to lose something forever. I have a special talent for placing things in locations so secure that even I can't find them again. Like some kind of low-budget magician, I'll be like, watch this, and then nobody ever sees that object again, including me. Somewhere in my house, there's a drawer full of items that were just supposed to be right here for a second while I'm doing this. And they're smart. I'm feeling proud, which should have been the first warning sign. I'm wiping counters, rearranging things, making executive decisions about where stuff should go, even though I am not qualified for that position. I don't even make decisions for myself very well. I still stare at menus like they're written in another language. Suddenly, I'm in charge of household organization, like I've been secretly trained for this my whole life. My wife comes back downstairs and she does that slow look around the room, the one that starts calm and ends in fear. And I can see it in her eyes. That moment where she realizes something is wrong, but she doesn't yet know how bad it is. Like when you smell smoke, but you're still hoping it's just someone else's problem. She asks, very politely, "What did you do?" Which is never a good sign, because no one asks that when something good has happened. I say, "I helped," which might be the most dangerous sentence a man can say in his own home. That word means something very different to me than it does to everyone else. To me, it means I was involved. To her, it means we are about to spend the rest of the day trying to undo whatever just happened. I'm pointing at things like, "Look, I cleaned," and she's looking at me like, "Is the one thing I needed 10 minutes ago." That's when I realize I have no idea what she's talking about, which is how most of my problems begin. She's asking about a folder, and I'm nodding like I know what a folder is, but in my head I'm thinking I touched a lot of flat objects today. This could be any of them. I start checking places I've never checked before, which is not encouraging for anyone watching. I'm opening cabinets, looking behind things, pretending I have a system, when really I'm just panicking quietly. And the worst part is, the more I try to fix it, the more confident I sound, which makes it all feel worse. I'm like, "Oh, it's probably right here," and it never is. It's never right here. If I say something is right here, it is emotionally somewhere else. And now we're both standing there, staring at the room I just improved, trying to figure out how 10 minutes of good intentions turned into a full-scale search operation. And I can feel that moment coming where she's gonna realize that we're actually fine before I decided to become helpful. That realization is hanging in the air, like it's just waiting to drop. It always starts with that quiet, dangerous feeling that maybe this time I've finally figured things out. The universe and I are briefly on the same page, and I've been promoted to a higher level of adulthood without being told. Nothing has actually changed. I haven't gained any new skills or wisdom. But suddenly I'm standing there thinking, this looks simple, and that thought alone should probably come with a warning label. There's something oddly comforting about believing you're capable for just a moment, especially when life is usually a long series of you proving to yourself that you are not. Tiny burst of confidence feels so good that you don't even question it. In that moment, everything around me looks manageable, almost inviting, like the room itself is saying, go ahead, you've got this, even though it has watched me struggle with much easier tasks before. And they're smart. I look at ordinary things and they don't seem threatening anymore. They just look like opportunities for me to show everyone, including myself, that I can handle responsibility without creating a small disaster. It's a very fragile kind of optimism, the kind that doesn't ask for evidence, just a willingness to believe in a version of myself that has never really existed, but feels extremely convincing in the moment. That false confidence moves fast too, because if it's slowed down, it might notice all the reasons it shouldn't be there. It rushes me into action before logic can catch up, pushing me to touch things, move things, make decisions I have absolutely no business making. I'm not thinking about consequences or past failures. I'm just riding that brief emotional high of feeling useful, which is intoxicating when you don't feel that way very often. It turns a simple situation into a stage where I'm ready to perform competence, even though I'm about to forget my lines, trip over the furniture, and somehow act surprised when the whole thing starts falling apart. There's something about a normal home setting that makes everything feel more intense. Nothing dramatic is supposed to happen there, and yet somehow it's where most of the real chaos lives. A living room or a kitchen looks harmless, and they're smart, but it's actually filled with emotional landmines that have been quietly waiting for the wrong person to step on them. When you're in that space, surrounded by everyday objects, you feel like you're in control, even though every item in the room belongs to someone else's system, someone else's logic. You're just a visitor pretending to know how things work. That's what makes the situation so funny and so uncomfortable at the same time. You're not trying to solve a big problem. You're just trying to exist in a shared space without causing damage, which somehow feels harder than it should be. A couch, a table, a stack of papers, they all look innocent, but they carry meaning you don't understand. The moment you start interacting with them, you're participating in a silent agreement you never actually read. It's like walking into a room mid-conversation and pretending you know what everyone's talking about, hoping no one asks you a direct question. The ordinary setting gives you a false sense of safety, which is what allows the mistakes to sneak up on you. You think, this is just a house, what could go wrong here? Not realizing that this is where all the routines, habits, and expectations live. Every drawer has a purpose, every pile has a story, and you're casually rearranging a life that's been carefully organized by someone who actually knows what they're doing. That contrast between how simple it looks and how complicated it really is pulls the audience in, because they recognize that feeling of walking into a familiar place and suddenly realizing it's only familiar if you're the one who put everything there. The real comedy doesn't come from one big mistake. It comes from the slow, almost polite way everything starts slipping out of control while you're still telling yourself it's fine. At first, nothing feels wrong enough to stop, which is what makes it so dangerous. You move one thing, and it seems harmless. You move another, and it still seems harmless. They're smart, and suddenly you're standing in the middle of a situation that looks very different from how it started. You're already too deep to admit you should have quit while you were ahead. What makes this moment work is that the audience can see the disaster forming before the character does. Every decision feels just slightly off, not dramatic enough to cause alarm, but uncomfortable enough to build tension. You're watching someone confidently walk down a path that clearly doesn't lead anywhere good, and the humor comes from how determined they are to keep going anyway. There's something painfully human about refusing to acknowledge that you're wrong until it's absolutely unavoidable. The character keeps adjusting, keeps making small fixes to cover up the previous small mistakes. That only makes everything more tangled. It's like trying to straighten a crooked picture frame by pushing on it harder and harder, even though all you're really doing is bending it further out of shape. Each new attempt feels logical in isolation, smart, but together they form a chain of bad decisions that's impossible to undo without admitting the whole plan was flawed. That slow buildup is what keeps people watching because they recognize that feeling of being trapped inside their own choices. You're not dealing with a sudden accident. You're dealing with a situation that's being quietly engineered into a mess by someone who believes they're fixing it. The tension sits in that space between confidence and reality, where the character is still smiling and explaining everything, even as the world around them is clearly starting to disagree. What makes the situation funny instead of uncomfortable is the way the character slowly turns the blame inward, even though no one has officially accused him yet. There's a quiet shift that happens when you realize the problem probably isn't the room, the situation, or even bad luck. And that realization arrives in small, awkward waves. At first, you're still defending yourself, still explaining why what you did made sense. They're smart, but there's a part of you that's already starting to doubt every decision you just made. Inner conflict is where a lot of the humor lives. You're watching someone try to hold on to dignity while also becoming more aware that they might be the only reason this is happening at all. He's not angry, he's embarrassed. And embarrassment has a way of softening everything. Instead of lashing out, he starts apologizing in advance, not even out loud, just in the way his body language changes, and his voice gets a little quieter, like he's slowly shrinking inside the mess he created. The guilt isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle, which makes it more relatable. He doesn't want to be the villain, he just wanted to be useful. Now he's standing there realizing that his good intentions might have made things worse. That's a very human kind of pain, because it doesn't come from trying to do something wrong. It comes from trying to do something right and missing the mark. The audience connects to that because everyone has had that moment where they think, I was just trying to help. Somehow, that makes it even more painful. As that guilt grows, it starts to shape every move he makes. He becomes more careful, more hesitant, as if each step might create another problem, and that nervous energy adds another layer of tension to the story. You can feel him wanting to rewind time just a few minutes, back to when nothing was broken yet, and he still believed he was doing something good. The smallest actions somehow end up creating the biggest problems, and that's the heart of the chaos. A single move, like picking up a stack of papers or shifting a chair, seems insignificant at first. In a house full of systems you don't understand, every tiny choice has consequences you can't predict. You think, I'm just helping, and then the next thing you know, you've triggered a chain reaction of confusion that could rival any disaster movie, only it's happening quietly in your own living room. There's a strange tension in that kind of comedy because the audience recognizes how innocent the original action was, which makes watching it spiral out of control both funny and painfully relatable. It's never one dramatic moment that makes the story. It's the accumulation of all the small, seemingly harmless decisions stacking on top of each other. You move something here, adjust something there. Each tiny adjustment feels productive in isolation, but together they form an invisible web of unintended consequences. The comedy comes from the contrast between the narrator's confidence and the reality that the world he's trying to fix is already slipping out of his control. It's the difference between intention and outcome, and that gap is where the humor lives. The audience is pulled in because they can see the mess forming, even as the narrator keeps moving forward. And they're smart, convinced that every choice is improving the situation. There's a tension in knowing what's coming before he does. That anticipation makes the laughter sharper. You can feel the character's best intentions bumping up against reality in ways that are awkward, unpredictable, endlessly entertaining. Every small action matters more than he realizes. Every attempt to correct one mistake leads to the creation of several more, turning a 10-minute task into a full-blown comedy of errors that's impossible to ignore. This slow escalation, where minor actions snowball into a major disaster, keeps the story alive because it's a domino effect of humor, embarrassment, relatability that audiences can't stop watching. The tension that keeps the audience glued isn't in what's already happened, it's in what might happen next. That uncertainty is what makes the story addictive. You're standing in the middle of a room that looks completely normal to anyone else. The character knows that every small choice he's made has been quietly stacking towards something catastrophic. He hasn't fixed anything, and he hasn't solved a problem, but he also hasn't been caught yet, which is exactly the sweet spot for comedy. It's that fragile balance between chaos and calm that makes viewers lean in. They're smart because they're waiting for the moment when the dominoes finally fall, and they're not sure what that will look like. The beauty of this tension is that it's relatable. Everyone has had a moment where they think, I've got this, only to realize seconds later that they don't. The audience is drawn to the narrator's perspective, seeing all the warning signs that he doesn't, and that dramatic irony keeps people engaged. You're laughing at his confidence while also silently rooting for him to somehow pull it off, because even in disaster there's hope. And hope makes every awkward turn more gripping. The uncertainty of what's coming next creates anticipation, a subtle kind of suspense that blends perfectly with comedy. As he continues to move around, trying to appear calm, every glance at a misaligned object, every misplaced item, builds the feeling that something is about to go very wrong. The tension is quiet, almost imperceptible, but it's always there, simmering under the surface, making the audience focus on every word, every movement. Even when nothing overtly catastrophic happens, the possibility of disaster is enough to keep viewers invested. Every small action feels loaded with consequences. The audience can't help but stay until they see how it all unfolds, because there's a magnetic pull in watching someone unknowingly walk toward a humorous but inevitable climax. It's this unfinished chaos, this sense that the story could tip over at any moment, that makes people stop scrolling, keep watching, and laugh at the brilliance of watching ordinary life spiral into extraordinary absurdity. So, after all that help, I finally realized that maybe some things are better left untouched, like the top shelf of the pantry, remote control, and apparently anything my wife cares about. I stood there in the middle of the room, surrounded by a pile of stuff that was supposed to be in order, feeling proud and defeated at the exact same time, which is a feeling I think only exists in people who try to help and fail spectacularly. And she looked at me, calm but suspicious, like she knew I had learned nothing, but also knew I'd try again tomorrow. And honestly, that's probably the only thing I got right. I tried for 10 minutes, and it was enough to make a mess I'll never live down, but at least I now have a new appreciation for the phrase, "Let me handle it